Well, welcome everyone to our quarterly CMAP Rate Committee meeting. I'll just go through a few brief items here. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of August 21st, 2020, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee to meet in person. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we posted the meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance, while we provided a recording of this meeting linked on our website, and we'll take all votes by roll call. A few reminders: please stay muted when not speaking. Unmute yourself at any point if you want to contribute to the conversation. Keep your video on if you're comfortable, but if you're not, that's okay. You can also use the chat feature for any questions or comments you might have, and Ryan will be monitoring that. Please be aware this meeting, including all messages in the chat box, will be recorded in compliance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act. For our guests and general public, we are very happy you could join us this morning, though we'd ask that you please remain muted until the public comment section at the end of the meeting. Moving to the second agenda item, as an important change has happened. Very happy for Eric Gallion, who was my co-chairman for many years with the Illinois Trucking Association. He has moved on into a new capacity at Walmart, I believe, and so he will no longer serve as co-chair on the committee due to his new job responsibilities. In turn, Matt Hart, our executive director of the Illinois Trucking Association, has taken Eric's place. For the third item, moving over to approval of minutes of our February 22nd meeting. We are going to do our approval of those minutes. As I mentioned, we do have to do a roll call vote. We will use this roll call vote to approve the minutes and to also confirm attendance, which will save us some time. Committee members do not need to abstain from approving minutes from a previous meeting that you did not attend. I'd be looking for a motion and a second to approve the minutes once Ryan does his roll call vote.
Okay, so oh, sorry. Yeah, we'd need the first and the second before I do roll call.
I'll motion it to approve.
Thanks, Sam.
Second.
Great. I'll go through and do roll call now. Joe Alonso from CDOT. Okay. Elaine Bottomley from Council of Mayors.
Present and yes.
Mike Burton from C&K Trucking.
Present and yes.
Raymond Drake from UPS. Colin Dusing from Will County.
Present and yes.
Henry from the Tollway.
Present, yes.
Matt Hart from Illinois Trucking.
Good morning, present and yes on those.
Thank you. Clark Carricker from Illinois Chamber.
Present and yes.
Kazia from UIC.
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you. Michael from FHWA. Okay. John from DuPage DOT. Libby Ogard from Libby Ogard.
Yes, present and yes.
Thank you. Adam Rod from CDA.
I am here, present.
Deanna Smith from IDOT.
Present and yes.
Herbert Smith.
Here.
Eric Varela. Peter Wolf from TTX.
Good morning, present and yes.
Sam Wright from Cook County.
Here and yes.
Okay, and that's everybody. Thank you.
All right.
Ryan, can you hear me? This is Deanna Smith.
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, gotcha.
All right, moving to our fourth agenda item as part of a newer arrangement. Given that CMAP is involved in so many other things, it's great to get insights here from Erin Allman, the CMAC Executive Director, to give an update on everything else that's going on with the organization. Erin?
Thanks so much. Just a few updates for the committee this morning, and I'm happy to answer questions on any of these items or anything else that you have curiosity about. So from our board meeting, we talked a lot about member projects and the surface transportation reauthorization. At last month, the House wrapped up its transportation appropriations and member priority projects process, otherwise known as earmarks. A requirement for these projects was that they really needed to be included in the region's transportation improvement program or the state's transportation improvement program, the TIP or the STIP, or be able to be added within a reasonable time frame. This, of course, elicited a number of questions about what that meant. So to be responsive, one of the things that we did as an agency was go through our TIP, send the TIP data to each of our congressional districts, so that they could take a look at what was already pre-existing in the TIP for this region. We also worked directly with our regional partners and congressional staff to be a resource to them to help them understand how the TIP works and that process and programming happens here in the region. So while the White House has agreed to the return of the earmark process, the Senate has not yet come to an agreement as to whether or not to bring these back. But we did hear late last week that they were going to start soliciting projects. So, you know, this process seems to continue to be moving forward here in terms of member projects for the region. Similar to the House Appropriations projects, the Senate really was looking at project eligibility that covers all the spending accounts that exist within appropriations processes and includes transportation funding for projects. So they're looking for projects that are more ready to go throughout this process. I know some of you may be familiar with past earmarks processes, so we're hopeful that this helps alleviate some of the challenges we had here in Illinois related to prior earmarking. Let's see, so it's again, it's still unclear, but how this process is actually going to take shape, but the current transportation bill expires in September, and so there's been some discussion about whether or not some of this will come through reconciliation or whether it will take shape through the next transportation bill, and we continue to just stay on top of that to understand where and how things will move here. So they've indicated that they'd like to have a bill by the end of this month. And so we've heard some positive signs that that's underway. I'm sure you're all aware too, but I wanted to mention it to this committee, but USDOT released a notice of funding availability for the RAISE grants, Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. It's the newest iteration of BUILD, which was previously TIGER, but the primary selection criteria are safety, environmental sustainability, quality of life, economic competitiveness, and state of good repair. And then some secondary criteria include partnership and innovation. Minimum grant award size is $5 million and maximum is $25 million, and no more than $100 million can be awarded to one state. Deadline for those grants is July 12th. And then since many of you work with local governments, I was just going to touch on the Treasury guidance for the state and local aid that recently came through. Last week, the Treasury released guidance on upcoming distributions of the $350 billion found in the American Rescue Plan to aid state and local governments. Eligible state, county, and metropolitan areas, which are cities over 50,000, may now request their allocation of the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds through the Treasury's website. All of those non-entitlement units, so governments that are below 50,000, should expect to receive their funding directly from the state. And according to the Treasury, the governments will receive funds in two different tranches. So 50% will be provided this year, soon, and then 50% will be provided 12 months later. So we anticipate that would be next year, May as well. The funds can be used to support health expenditures, addressing economic impacts to workers and households, to replace public sector revenue, for investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The final interim rule has been posted. They're encouraging feedback on the guidance still. So we had that in our weekly last week. So if you're interested in taking a look, you can find it on our website or we can send it to you. I also wanted to touch on the Canadian National purchase. I think many of you on this committee, given that it's our freight committee, are aware that the Kansas City Southern has accepted the acquisition offer by the Canadian National Railway. The board discussed it at our meeting last week, Wednesday, and we agreed that we would draft a letter to the review board with some questions around potential impacts and provide considerations for needed research that would be beneficial here to our region. We're drafting the letter now, so if you have thoughts on what we might want to inquire about, please do let us know. And then finally, we are in the fall, we'll have a State of the Region event. One of the things we're doing is really trying to make sure that we're making steps towards achieving the 2050 plan. We'll be doing a public opinion survey to understand where there might be opportunities to advance or where there might need to be greater education and outreach across the region related to some of the implementation activities of the 2050 plan. But we'll also have an awards program as well, where we'll celebrate a visionary leader for the region and also people or projects who are supporting the core principles of the 2050 plan, which is inclusive growth, resiliency, and prioritized investment. So wanted to give you just a brief note that October 7th will be the date of the event. We're still trying to figure out if we're doing in person or all virtual or a combination of both. And then my last little note is this came across my desk to the extent that this committee is interested. I saw that AASHTO had passed a resolution to support a mileage-based user fee national pilot. I haven't taken a close look at it yet, but I know that lots of people have been discussing it in the development of the next transportation bill reauthorization as well. So with that, that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Aaron, when things get back into the mix, and given the fact that this committee has not met since you moved to the new office space, where will we go to check in, and what floor are you on, and just how do we get there?
All of that sort of good stuff. Yeah, so we are in the old post office on the 4th floor. And you know, when you come into the lobby, if you come in on the Van Buren side, there's a security desk similar to many of the buildings downtown. We'd have your name on a list. There are 2 elevator bays that then you can take up to the 4th floor. And it should be pretty straightforward from there. You'll see Ingrid's smiling face when you arrive. We have a series of conference rooms. We've conveyed over the county name. So our largest county, Cook County, is our largest room, but all of the conference rooms will accommodate to all of our committees, and it's a little bit more of an open environment, but we have had the benefit of that this was being constructed when we went into this pandemic. We've had the benefit of having the most state-of-the-art air filtration systems and negative ion sort of filtration systems built into our building. So we're comfortable and confident that we are up to par in terms of what we would need to host meetings. I think we're waiting to sort of see how we get through this bridge phase. We're planning on sending staff back to work in September 7th is our target date. But again, I think we will continue to do some reduced capacity and rotate people in and out, partially due to continuing to want to keep people healthy, but also I think partially because people have enjoyed the flexibility, and should schools go back full time in the fall, I think, you know, working from home might be easier for folks.
I'm definitely looking forward. I think the rest of the committee eventually meeting in person here and checking out the new dig. So.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to show you around, take you up to the rooftop. It's a pretty cool building.
I wanted to just make a quick comment. I just wanted to thank CMAP and Aaron for your leadership as we went through the hectic process of the community project funding request with all the House members. Cook County was jumped on the opportunity to get some projects in, and we were able to get 1 or 2 for each House member's district, and the the county hasn't been the best about putting our own projects that don't have any federal funding onto the ETIP or onto the municipal tip. So it was very nice that we were able to work together to get some letters explaining sort of how things work, and making sure that projects were still getting funded or had committed funding. So just I want to thank CMAP again just for helping us get through that process, and I think it's hopefully, knock on wood, that it will pay off in the long run.
We were happy to help. Thanks, Sam, for that.
This is Colin Dusing from Will County. I'm one of the communities that was impacted by the CN purchase of the EJ&E a few years ago. The local governments then, and probably not so much this time around, but the main things to consider would be the downtime of gates and disruption of traffic, the any noise increases. I doubt that's going to be much of an issue with this particular purchase, and with that downtime of gates, emergency services, getting emergency services through in a timely manner. Again, it's not the same purchase, so I know it's not going to be the same type of impacts, but those are the considerations that the local governments had at that time, just for your consideration when you're drafting your letter.
Thanks, Colin. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it'd be nice to know at least the best they could. I know just reading up on it that the CN has tried to explain a little bit about how, very broad brush strokes, like how traffic would sort of diverge and how they expect a lot of the traffic to East Canada to go through, come up to the EJ&E and head east towards Detroit. Some of the west stuff go around Chicago up through DuPage and through the northwest suburbs. It'd be nice to get a little bit more clear, if they could, get a breakdown a bit of how they would see that happening, just so that we could know, how much traffic are we expecting through the west suburbs versus the south suburbs. I'm not sure they're going to have much, willing to give much on that, but it would be it'd be good to get a little bit of a breakdown.
Thanks. It's our intention to try and make it known that it's helpful for us for planning purposes to have that sort of information.
Sure. Thanks.
Any other questions for Aaron?
Well, thanks for your time this morning.
Aaron, thank you very much for the overview of everything that's going on, and appreciate your participation in our committee hearing. Moving on to agenda item 5, the CMAP call for projects. We're going to have CMAP Kama Dobbs and Doug Ferguson presenting on several of the various call for projects that occurred following our last committee meeting. Doug, Kama, take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Doug Ferguson, and as Herbert mentioned, I'm joined today by my CMAP colleague, Kama Dobbs. We're going to provide you with a summary of the call for surface transportation applications for the CMAC, Stp Shared Fund, and local TAP programs. All of these programs are federal funds that come to our region, and through our project selection committees, CMAP is the programmer of them. The CMAC program, which stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement, is really focused on air quality and reducing congestion. The region receives these funds because we're a non-attainment for the federal air quality standards. The Stp Shared Fund is actually a split off from the regional Stp funds that we receive that are separate from those that are programmed by the City of Chicago and the Council of Mayors. Its focus is on funding projects that have a strong regional impact. The locally programmed TAP funds is really focused on the completion of the Regional Greenways and Trails Plan. From January 8th through March 5th, CMAP held a call for applications. So next slide. And in total, we received 121 applications for the 3 programs in combined. The total project cost of all the applications received was over $3 billion. The federal funds being requested was 1.7 billion. Next slide. So with the CMAQ program, it has several categories that include everything from transit improvements to traffic flow improvements, bicycle facilities, direct emission reduction projects, and then also demonstration. So those are the broad categories that the CMAQ program considers. We score the projects based upon their cost effectiveness to reduce emissions, as well as project category specific criteria. While the program does not have a freight specific category, both the traffic flow and the direct emissions categories often have freight impacts built into them. We received a total of 29 traffic flow improvements that were split between intersection improvements and signal interconnects, but we also received 2 direct emissions applications. And specifically under the direct emissions applications, we received one from the City of Chicago for their electric hybrid truck incentives program, which encourages truck fleet operators to switch purchasing direct diesel trucks to alternative fuels and in specific electric, which have reduced emissions. This is a prior fund program that we did with the City of Chicago, but it hasn't been able to grow just due to some of the constraints on the federal side concerning Buy America waivers. So in the past, the CMAQ program is also considered in funded applications such as switcher locomotive retrofits and replacements to reduce rail yard emissions, highway rail grade separations, and bottleneck elimination and intersection improvement projects that were designed to help reduce out of direction truck travel. So that's kind of just a summary overview of the CMAQ program and some of the applications that were received. I'm now going to toss it over to Kama to talk about the Stp Shared Fund. Next slide.
Great, thank you, Doug. In the Stp Shared Fund, there are actually 2 project categories that are directly related to improving freight movement. Those are highway rail grade crossing improvements and truck route improvements. The grade crossing category includes both full grade separations as well as more general crossing improvements to make the crossing safer. We also apply what we call planning factors to shared fund applications, and one of those factors measures the freight impacts of projects in 4 categories, which are road expansion, road reconstruction, bridge projects, as well as small area or corridor safety projects. This factor awards points to projects that are located on the regional freight networks or that are identified in a freight mobility plan. Points are also awarded to projects in jurisdictions where there are online truck permitting programs or delivery management policies, or where a truck routing study or systematic review of truck restrictions has been completed. Next slide, please. This application cycle, we received 7 applications for highway rail grade crossing improvements. One of those, the Grand Avenue grade separation in Elmwood Park, was actually deemed ineligible because it's currently undergoing a planning and environmental linkages or PEL study, which doesn't quite meet our eligibility requirement for projects to have their phase 1 NEPA work substantially complete. Although I think that this project will be well positioned to apply in our next call for projects, which will happen in 2 years. 3 of the eligible applications are actually full grade separations, and the other 3 would make crossing improvements that primarily provide safety benefits rather than reduction of delay for trains. We also received 6 applications for truck route improvement projects that are primarily focused on correcting insufficient outer lane widths for trucks or correcting intersections with insufficient turn radii or queue storage for trucks. So next, please, Ryan. So right now, we're in the process of evaluating the applications for all 3 programs and developing our staff recommended programs of projects, which we presented to our respective project selection committees in July. Throughout the summer, we'll be accepting public comment on the recommendations, and then following that comment period, staff will make any appropriate revisions to the programs based on public comment, and we'll seek final selection committee approvals in September, followed by MBO policy committee approval in October. Next, please. To learn more about these programs, including details on the scoring criteria, summary information about the individual applications, and then in July, the recommended programs themselves, you can visit the Call for Projects webpage on the CMAP website, and that is cmap.is/2021 call for projects. So next, you can also contact either myself or Doug with any questions, or we're happy to take questions right now.
Hey guys, this is Matt Hart from the Illinois Trucking Association. I got a quick question for you. Where does the funding fall in the process that you've laid out there? Is this, I mean, this is going to lead to recommendations. Do we already have funding for this? Is there a mixture of funding? Where does the funding fall in this process?
Yeah,
Sure.
so yep. So these are all federal transportation funds. So they're coming through the federal transportation bill. The actual funding flows through IDOT, and it's done on a reimbursement. So the funds are there. They get appropriated on an annual basis. We're programming into out years. So we are making some assumptions that these federal programs will still be there. But what happens if we don't make the planning effort, the funding becomes available, and then we scramble to get projects together that can use it. So what we're hoping is that through our process, even though we're looking out 2 to 3 years from now, that these projects will be at that point ready for the federal funds when they become appropriated. And as I did mention, they're reimbursable funds, which is true for all FHWA funds. As in, you expend the funds, you can seek reimbursement, but typically the turnaround time is once they're expended and a bill is submitted, no more than 2 weeks, but it's usually a couple of days.
And are any of these, do you typically have contingencies too from local governments that they contribute, or are these completely funded through the program?
Yeah, so we are required to do an 80-20 match. However, in the last few cycles, we've started to work with communities that we've deemed as being higher need communities, using toll development credits to help match those funds for those communities that may not be able to match the funds at a 20% match, thereby making sure that everybody in the region has access to these funds. Okay. I would add that there is, because these are federal funds, there is a requirement that they have a public sponsor of some point at some point. But there is the ability to work with private entities, such as we did with the switcher locomotive projects. We worked with the communities that had the rail yards and then the individual operators.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
I had a question. Cami, you mentioned that the Grand Avenue crossing was didn't qualify because they sort of split their phase 1 down to a Pell and a phase 1, as the federal government has said. Well, they want to do 2 years environmental reviews, and so a big part of that is just, if you have a 3-year environmental review, do part of your work as a Pell and then start your environmental review later. And we know, as Cook County, we know that more of our projects are going to be moving to that sort of process where there's a Pell study first and then the actual environmental review starting in a truncated phase 1. For a future call for projects, is there going to be taking a look at that again to see how, like, if they have a Pell study complete but not their phase one, is it become eligible but not as many points or anything like that? Is that being considered in the future at all?
So actually, Sam, each time we go through a cycle of a call for projects, we finish up our call for projects and immediately start studying, kind of lessons learned from that process and start tweaking the methodology for the next one. So yeah, I think that as Pell is kind of emerging as a tool in this region, we do need to talk about that for the next call for projects, is how does that fit into, our current application eligibility, which is that phase one be substantially complete. I think we need to take a look at, is a completed Pell equivalent to phase one being substantially complete, or what's the right balance? So that's definitely something we'll be looking at, 6 to 8 months from now as we gear up for our next call for project cycle, because we do these calls for projects every other year. So
sure, no, that's great to hear. I figured that was going to be the case, but I thought I should ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any other questions? Hearing none, Kemma and Doug, thank you very much for the update.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, thank you.
All right, we'll move to our 6th agenda item, the truck electrification update with Dave Schaller, who is the Industry Engagement Director for the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. His responsibilities include interfacing with fleets, OEMs, and suppliers, writing reports, conducting workshops, giving presentations, and running the social media group. Dave works closely with the drivers and partners for the Run on Less demonstrations. He previously worked at Navistar for 27 years, holding positions in production design, research, program management, dealer sales training, marketing, product line management, and strategic product planning. I'm really looking forward to this conversation presentation, Dave, that you have. And after you present, would love to hear some more about your thoughts too with the Lion Electric announcement Governor Pritzker made last week. So with that, Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Great introduction, appreciate it, and I really look forward to sharing with you today. If you go to the next slide for me, please. NACFE is a nonprofit organization sponsored by the industry, and a lot of these members are our board of directors members. So we have leadership from truck fleets, truck OEMs, trailer OEMs, tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers, etc. We have just in the past couple of years had a real focus on electric trucks because we've done a lot of work on existing technologies that can help truck fleets be more efficient and effective. But for the last 3 years, we've worked heavily on electric trucks. We have several new philanthropic organizations, the Hewlett Foundation and Climate Works, that have come on board. The good news is we have no membership. So anyone listening to this call today has free and total access to everything I'm showing you. Next slide, please. We started out over 10 years ago with a focus on the first 2 pillars. One, to scale current technologies. And think of that as tire inflation systems, trailer skirts underneath trailers, aerodynamics, etc. We also had a challenge to improve information flow. There's so much information. How does a truck fleet digest it all and get information that's helpful to them? And then about 3 years ago, we said we need to also be looking forward into the future with guiding emerging technologies. So you can find us at truck shows all over North America. We write reports, we collaborate with different people on different kinds of tests. But predominantly today, I'm going to focus on 2 of our areas, Run on Less demonstrations and electrification guidance reports. All of this information is on either NACFE, nacfe.org, or runonless.com. Next slide, please. This is an eye chart that I used to laugh at and never use, and now I find it quite valuable. As we're looking to changes in the truck industry, our organization has been doing an annual fleet fuel study for quite a few years. our most recent one in 2019. We study 85 different technologies, and these 20 leading fleets tell us what they buy each and every year so that we can track the technology adoption. And what I want to show you here, you can't tell anything from these colored lines, but I can tell you one thing. No technology in the truck industry went from 0% adoption to 100% adoption in under a decade. And a lot of these are relatively simple technologies. So as we're looking at big, bold, complex technologies with electrification, hydrogen, autonomous vehicles, et cetera, know that it's going to be well over a decade to get adoption moving. So we've got a lot of trends. If you're into that, we've got the information. Next slide, please. As part of that, we started asking fleets, well, tell us about your new trucks. How good are your new trucks? And in 2016, it got us asking the question, what's the best of the best in the trucking industry? And we had 7 fleets that allowed us to put a telematics system on one of their best tractors with a best trailer and one of their very best drivers. And at a point in time in 2017 where a national average for heavy duty line haul trucks was somewhere around 6.4, 6.5 miles per gallon, these trucks, no R&D, no special stuff. You could go out and order these trucks the following Monday morning. They threw down 10.1 miles per gallon over the course of 3 weeks. It got a lot of exposure in the truck industry. It showed that if you order trucks correctly, operate them in the best possible ways, well-trained drivers, you can have substantial improvements in efficiency and lower costs. We had a fair number of fleets that, oh, okay, Dave, that's all great, that's wonderful, but I don't do long haul, so that number's irrelevant to me. So we came back 2 years later in 2019 and did it again. This time we had way more fleets. We limited it to 10 fleets and did regional hauls. Said your trucks can be no more than 300 miles from home on any given day. Most of the trucks were home every single evening. And those gentlemen and that lady threw down 8.3 miles per gallon. Now, one of those trucks was a CNG truck, although it did incredibly well for CNG. The diesel conversion that the fleet used wasn't real positive. If you just look at the 9 diesel tractors, they actually came in at 8.7. And in a regional haul market, the national average is around 6 miles per gallon. So again, we're looking at an improvement that's somewhere in the 30 to 50% range compared to a lot of different baselines that are out there. Well, for 2021, our board of directors has given us permission to once again go do run on less. Only this time, there'll be no miles per gallon. We have 13 different fleets with 13 different vehicles that are all battery electric trucks, and we're going to be bringing that to you in September. Next slide, please. We've gone out and talked to over 30 potential partners. And yes, we've talked with Tesla, Rivian, Arrival, Lion, all those companies you can think of. One of our challenges to them was the trucks need to be in service by June 1st because we're going out to do videotapes. I fly out on my first business trip in a year tomorrow to go up to Minneapolis to visit one to do video interviews with the drivers, the fleet managers, the vehicle OEMs, etc. What we wanted to find as we talked to all these folks was a mix. We want multiple classes and duty cycles. We want multiple truck OEMs. We want locations all over North America. And we were looking for uptime, scaling potential, et cetera. So we've talked to a lot of people in the industry in the last 6 months. Next slide, please. What we've put together for the world is that we announced at the end of the March who the participants will be. I'll show you in a second. Secondly, announced that we would have an electric truck boot camp with 10 training sessions happening every other Tuesday. I've got another slide on that. Then we'll go into the pre-run mode that I described to you where we're visiting all of them and putting our website together for this event. We will kick off on September 3rd at the ACT Expo, Alternative Clean Transportation Expo in Long Beach, California. And from there, we will be doing a lot of truck shows because a lot of truck shows from the beginning of the year have been flipped over to the second half. So TMC in Cleveland, SAE Comvec in Chicago, New York City for Climate Week, the Move Show in Austin, all happening during the time period that we're doing this. And then we will do some post-run wrap-up at the ATA MC&E show. So we're thankful to have major sponsors like Dana Meritor and Shell come on to make all this possible for us. Next slide, please. So who are these fleets? Here are the 13 fleets that make up this year's Run on Less Electric. And it is exciting. Yes, we have a vehicle in Chicago. A workhorse C1000 will be operating for Alpha Bakery. So I will be up in the Chicagoland area recording that video here in the next couple months. But you look at this, there's different size vehicles to the left-hand side in California. All of the tractor trailers we were able to get into the run are happening out there. If you look at it from any number of different perspectives, if you want big names in the trucking industry, we have Ruan, we have Penske, we have NFI. For some reason, it's turned into the party event. We have a lot of folks doing beverages of adult styles, Biaggi Winery, Anheuser-Busch, SAQ up in Montreal is the Quebec Liquor Board. We have vans, we have box trucks, we have electric yard tractors with Ruan and Ryder. We even have a Roush Cleantech supporting a vehicle in Carolina with a Roush Fenway racing team. So we've got 3 different companies supporting e-commerce delivery with Perlator, DHL, and Cardenas. So a lot of different variety, a lot of different trucks, and a lot of different locations. So we were very pleased with the type of variety we can bring in. Next slide, please. What you'll see here is that we described to the world that electrification in the truck industry is going to happen from inside their distribution center or shop and head outward, that electric fork trucks are already here. Secondly, right below the electric fork truck is electric yard tractor. That's a tractor that moves trailers around the big yards, putting them in and out of the dock doors. Then to the medium duty delivery trucks. Next out to intermodal drayage, whether it's out at a water port in Long Beach or LA or at one of the many intermodal hubs in Chicago. Also regional haul tractors. What's really not here yet are long haul tractors. There aren't enough out there in customers' hands to really test anything and share that. But we're pleased that these 4 major areas that are bold-faced here will be part of our Run on Less. Next slide, please. Part of what we're trying to do is also, we deal with a lot of folks in government positions. They're not necessarily trucking experts. We want to help educate people. We also work with a lot of people in educational institutions. So we're working on this slide to show the vertical axis of market share, the horizontal axis of electrification time frame. And there are already substantial numbers of transit buses and school buses that have been electrified. But those populations are relatively small and the miles per year that they put on are relatively small. Another area that is having tremendous success in electrification is yard tractors. They don't go very far, they don't go very fast, therefore their engine doesn't work up much heat to make the exhaust after treatment system on a diesel engine work properly. So they are a phenomenally good electrification application. Then we go and look at the bigger things, medium duty delivery. There are tons. Population nearly 2 million vehicles doing deliveries, whether it's to e-commerce, to your homes, to your businesses, etc. Most of our work at NACFE over the past decade has focused on the top level here on regional haul and long haul for this simple reason. They put on the most miles and there are the most of them. So in terms of having an impact on the environment, an impact on the supply of diesel fuel, what's being used, that's where we've been focusing. They are part of our work, but they aren't necessarily the first areas to be electrified. There are other areas that probably will lag significantly. In vocational Class 8, they're out on work sites, they're doing erratic routes. Expediters, Class 5 through 8, they're all over the place for factories and companies that need rush deliveries, not on routine situations, deliveries where they can get back to a charging system. So this just kind of helps us lead this discussion that there are going to be, and these are only a few segments, there are many other segments to the truck industry, but these are some of the bigger buckets. Next slide, please. Pathways to heavy duty truck charging. First and foremost is fleet depot based, that they'll be put in where a fleet's doing electrification, running in and out of their operations. Secondly, we expect to see more opportunity charging, whether it's at stores, at ports, at warehouses, where there are a significant number of electric trucks going in and out. Thirdly, If you look at alternative fuels, quite a few fleets use shared card lock locations. They're not necessarily truck stops. They're private locations fenced in where they've got electric cards for access and charging. So they could be done at a common location for several fleets. Fourth, we have truck stops. There are truck stops talking about it. I don't know of any that have electrification for the trucks yet. Some have it for passenger cars. Don't know of any for truck stops. Toll road rest areas. Yes, I took this picture in the Chicagoland area since I grew up in Illinois and come through that area quite frequently. Lastly, our interstate rest areas, because until very recently, it was illegal to have any type of fueling activity in an interstate rest area. My understanding is that that ruling has been recently revised to allow states to start making determinations on whether they would allow such a thing. And down below are two other areas that are going to come along at some point in time: mobile roadside charging, whether it's an emergency or a service call, as well as potential in-motion charging with electrified induction pavement setups. Next slide, please. Our boot camp that's underway right now, the third in the series, is tomorrow, and these are the 10 subject matters. So we started out with why electric trucks. We're in the midst of talking about charging systems and utility companies right now, working our way into incentives, maintenance, finance, supply chains, global perspectives, and drivers, etc. These are all free of charge. You can go to our Run on Less website to get signed up, and if you've missed one or two or want to catch up later, you can go there, and a couple days after the session will be online, so you can watch it at your convenience. Next slide, please. What we've also done over the last 3 years is publish a series of reports on electric trucks that are available to everyone. We started out with electric trucks where they make sense back in May of 2018. From there, we went to medium-duty electric trucks because it's where they made sense first. From there, we went to electric trucks and the charging infrastructure because we're talking about much higher power levels than you do for passenger cars. The largest ones, which would fall into the next report, viable class 7 and 8, there are heavy-duty class 8 electric trucks that are talking about having charging systems in the 1 to 1.5 megawatt range. So very significant power levels. We are an organization made up of predominantly engineers and MBAs, early retirees that have had a lot of experience introducing these things. So this is what we tend to talk about. We changed paths with our 5th report in November of 2020. Actually, we came out in June of 2020 with a report on the hot areas, hot regions, high potential for the US, and it was so well received, we very quickly expanded it to include Canada. That it talks about the incentives, the state governments, the funding available, the type of operations due to traffic, terrain, etc., that can help with regenerative braking and make that more attractive. So that report is out there. No, the Midwest and Chicagoland area don't rank terribly high right now. The last report on this whole area we've published was late last year on heavy-duty hydrogen fuel cell tractors. Next slide, please. As you look at these, we've got infographics in them. For instance, when you look at the infrastructure report, we talk about number one thing you need to do is engage with your utility company. What kind of power do they have available currently in the area you're at? And the reason we talk about this is there's a potential you may want to move your facility to an area where it's easier to get power in the types of quantities that you want in the future. So we lay out a whole roadmap and all the steps that need to be taken to consider these kinds of things. Next slide, please. We also have this bridge to the future. If you give me one more click, presently here in 2020, we are at a situation where a lot of these technologies are relatively immature and there are many unknowns and challenges out there. Diesel has a legacy that simply dominates in the heavy-duty truck market. Natural gas has a substantial input. We're now in this period of 2 to 3 decades here in what we call the messy middle. And if you give me one more click, we're in a situation where there's going to be many optimized solutions. There's going to be growing infrastructure. There's multi-fuel choices. There's a lot of innovation, venture capitalists putting money in. And we're going to replace a lot of these estimates that we're talking about with facts. And we're going to start seeing hydrogen fuel cells, battery electrics, hybrids of all types, renewable natural gas, renewable diesel. And with one more click, we're going to end up out here in the 2040, 2050 timeframe, where we're going to have fast charging almost everywhere. We'll have long life, low cost batteries with acceptable weights. Expect to see batteries change like they have on cell phones, going from carrying a briefcase down to something you keep in your pocket. So we'll have battery electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles, and a few other things out in that time frame. Next slide, please. When people say, Dave, is it really messy? It's really messy. These are all the different ways fleets can fuel medium duty, heavy duty, and reefer trailers right now. Not only do we have the traditional petroleums and their different derivatives with biodiesel, ethanol, methanol, renewable diesel, we've got the whole series of gaseous fuels, but right here in the middle, battery electric, and all the hybrid versions, whether it's a hybrid with diesel, gas, CNG, nitrogen, hydrogen, all these things are coming into play now. So there are a lot of different methods available to truck fleets, and every one of these has a nonprofit promoting their efforts, have fleets that believe that, and companies that believe this is the path to the cleaner future. So there's a lot of development work going on here. Next slide, please. For those of you that are struggling to keep track of who are all these players and what's happening here, we recommend going to CalStart's drive20zero.org website. They have something called the Zero Emission Technology Inventory. And you can click on any of those blue circles to pick out an individual supplier. And then you can pick on the time frame you're looking for in the lower left, and it'll actually show you which OEMs have a vehicle that might work for you and when it's coming to market, what the link is to go look at it. So we're not tracking this, but we recommend people looking at another nonprofit's tool here on what's happening. Next slide, please. Some of these commercial battery electric vehicles will be quote unquote range extended, that we have OEMs and suppliers working on hydrogen fuel cells, but they're still an electric truck. We have Hyliion's Hypertruck that runs on CNG or RNG. So there are situations where vehicles can run further without having infrastructure network to have every 300-400 miles for recharging opportunities. So there are a lot of things that can happen before substantial infrastructure is spread out across the country. Next slide, please. We get asked frequently, isn't hydrogen competing with battery electric? Well, we'd like to tell the world that they're actually competitors and very close teammates. When you look at them, they both require rechargeable batteries. They both require electric drive motors, high power cables, software management systems, regenerative braking. The real difference is that a hydrogen fuel cell truck requires substantially less lithium-ion batteries, and they add a hydrogen fuel cell and a hydrogen tank to continuously generate that electricity. And they both require massive amounts of electricity consumption. Actually, hydrogen is significantly higher because it's less efficient in all the conversions that need to take place. So in essence, if you can get the job done with a battery electric truck, there's less complexity that you'll be dealing with. If you can't get it done with a battery electric truck, hydrogen fuel cell truck may be your answer for the future. Next slide, please. As we look at hydrogen, I find this an interesting discussion for Chicago. I've been very active with some of you already and working with a team of others as part of the Advanced Energy Group's Chicago Challenge. As we look at hydrogen in the Chicagoland area, hydrogen really needs to be for more than just the truck industry to ever get into a cost of production that's affordable. The interesting opportunity here is that two of the industries that you could use a lot of hydrogen are the steel industry, which you've got Gary sitting right here next door to us, and the fertilizer industry. And you're located right in the middle of the Midwest and farmland for fertilizer. So there's a substantial opportunity for those two industries as well as the trucking industry. Another key aspect is that Chicago has a lot of nuclear energy that's very clean for producing the hydrogen. So we like to talk about it this way, that there are different hydrogens that are becoming available right now. So the horse race is really only going into the first turn. Yes, everybody's betting on green at the final finish line, but right now, whatever's available, start developing the truck, start developing the process, and the fuels will catch up and get greener as we move forward. Next slide, please. The high potential regions report I mentioned earlier highlights that the California coast, the Pacific coast area scores extremely well. The Texas Triangle, Northeast, New York has some substantial offerings out there to get fleets to convert. For instance, I think right now they have an offer that 95% of the upcharge to go from your standard vehicle to an electrified version, they'll cover if you qualify. So it almost makes it a wash purchasing the electric vehicle. We're working with Canada now and understand there's some really intriguing situations there that Quebec has so much hydropower. They're 99% clean energy from Hydro-Quebec. So the desire to move toward electric vehicles is very strong there. Next slide, please. There are also 15 states in the Washington, D.C. area that signed a memorandum of understanding last July. If you look at the right-hand side here, 30 by 30 is no longer an ESPN special. It's a target for these states for sale of electric trucks, that they're working together trying to figure out how to get new truck sales up to 30% by 2020. So that's a very substantial change, and 100% by 2050. So some states are very aggressively going after this change. Next slide, please. When we talk to fleets, why would you consider electrification now? Well, if there are incentives that are or will become available that can cover some of these costs of conversions, like I mentioned, and you're considering going that route, take the opportunity to use those incentives to cover the difference and start learning now. Additionally, from power, your facility, a lot of truck terminals tend to be right together and congregate together. You've got a large industrial complex out in the O'Hare area that if you can get to that power before your neighbors, you might have a substantial cost and timing opportunity. Obtaining the power infrastructure can take years depending on where it is and what it takes to bring your portion of the grid up to speed. It might also be easier, as I mentioned earlier, to relocate, and the physical challenge of your lot will probably change, almost undoubtedly change, whereas today, most lots are gravel, some are paved, and it's very easy to change where the trailers and trucks are. That won't be the case in the future. And lastly, change is coming. Even if you're a total believer in diesel and electric isn't something you're interested in, know that you've got new diesel requirements coming for 2024 and 2027. So there'll be more sensors, more technologies, whatnot on the trucks, and most likely from what we've seen in the past, more costs. Next slide, please. We, NACFE, have been working for 10 years, collaborating with fleets, with OEMs, with suppliers, with dealerships, with government entities, whether it's state, federal, DOE, DOT, etc. What we are changing right now is working with new OEMs. Just looking at this page, put a smile on your face. I didn't do this special for you. Lion Electric's up there on the top. That's their Lion 8. Then we've got Tesla, Orange EV, Exos, Neuron, and Nikola. So we're trying to work with absolutely all of these are the heavy duty folks. You've got Arrival, Rivian, and a whole host of others in the medium duty side, but we're also working with charging system suppliers and very heavily with utility companies now, inviting them into the truck industry and getting them engaged in the conversation. Next slide, please. We've also put out a report on regional haul because this is one of the areas that has a substantial opportunity. And part of the opportunity is that there's a driver shortage right now. It's very tough to get new drivers. Regional haul has an opportunity of having the drivers home virtually every night. It also has the opportunity to use alternative fuels because the trucks are going in and out of a centralized location and don't need to have a network out there. Now, just to give you an idea, somewhere between 40 to 45% of tractors sold on any given year are day cabs. So they have no capacity for anyone to sleep in them. And there are a fair number of truck fleets doing regional haul applications with sleeper tractors just so they can switch back and forth between different business segments at any given time. So in our estimation, at least half of the trucking world and the freight world is running regional haul, and we've got a report that details those opportunities. Next slide, please. Also want to mention our Run on Less regional that we did in 2019, that you can go there to the Run on Less site and look back at 2019. The 10 fleets vertically here in this dark blue bar, CNS Wholesale Grocers, Hirschbach, Hogan, JB Hunt, Meyer, PepsiCo, Ploger, Schneider, Southeastern, and UPS were all part of it. For any of these fleets for any given day, you can see that blue ball and the red arrows there. You can move it back and forth and look at any one of the 10 trucks and where they were operating. Our telematics monitored speed, monitored elevation profile, temperature, etc., so that you can see duty cycles that are typical for trucks in this part of the industry. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip over conclusions. Let's just go on the right-hand column to data benefits. Oops. We put out a report on what we see as opportunities and learnings for diesel fleets from Run on Less. But we also worked in conjunction with the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, or NREL, and put out a report on what those 10 trucks would have looked like if they would have been battery electric powertrains instead of diesel. Simultaneously, we worked with Ballard, who makes hydrogen fuel cells, and put together a report on what those 10 trucks would look like if they were hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So we're trying to continue our efforts to get information out there to the whole industry on how these changes can be seen and what they're going to look like. Next slide, please. We're really at a stage right now where the utility companies recognize a few of the fleets and the fleets recognize a few of the utilities. It's kind of like a junior high school dance. You recognize a few of those others on the other side of the room. You're just not real sure about how to have that opening conversation, nor do you have any idea what a long-term relationship really wants to be like. So we're very fortunate at NACFE. We work closely with the Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI. And between the two organizations, we've put together a primer on utilities for fleets and a primer for fleets on utilities, trying to get some of this gap closed up and get those conversations happening. So if you're looking for information like that, we'd love to work with you. Next slide, please. I've been asked questions by people on why aren't all truck fleets looking at electrification. Ladies and gentlemen, truck fleets are facing an absolute tsunami of disruptive factors in their business right now, and COVID-19 is just the tip of the way. We've got autonomous vehicles, electrification, phenomenal amount of driver retirement potential, technology and data handling with blockchain, artificial intelligence, changing regulations. There's a lot going on. It is very difficult to manage a truck fleet. So you got three basic choices in that situation. If you're scared of the tsunami and don't want to be part of it, you run to high ground and get the heck out of the way. If you're the traditional in the truck industry, you're just going to stand your ground and watch it hit. And you better hope when the wave goes over the top of you, you come up breathing on the backside. You haven't been ground against the coral on the bottom as all the changes happen. But we at NACFE would like to recommend that you wax up the surfboard, work with ourselves, with CalSTART, with other groups, and find a way to capture this energy and work with people to make it exciting and make the most of the energy and the changes that are coming at us. And we'd highly like to recommend that you follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, look at our websites. You can contact me or our Executive Director, Mike Roth. We're out here to work with truck fleets, work with state trucking associations, etc. We're all about helping the industry become more efficient, and that's what we do for a living. So I greatly thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I guess now we get to open it up for Q&A. And your first question you gave to me, I remember when you handed it over to me, is on Lion Electric. Congratulations, that is a phenomenal opportunity. It's great to know you're going to have an electric truck manufacturer putting in their facility in Chicago. I hope that helps you greatly to have that facility right there and have the distribution and support that kind of company brings.
Dave, fantastic presentation. This is a lot of great information, and as a seasoned person on the OEM side with your experience with through Navistar, I'm curious, and being familiar with Illinois, Lion Electric, Rivian before, particularly the Amazon purchase. You've got UPS. Ray Drake, I believe, is on the call today. We've got a bunch of trucking companies on. Matt Hart with the Illinois Trucking Association, Mike Burnham with C&K Trucking. I'm curious from as this committee and as the state tries to land more OEM investments around this space from your not just the OEMs but your supplier community, what is it that the state could do better? What is it from a policy standpoint that would be more attractive to continue to grow these industry clusters, you know, throughout the state?
Well, there's a challenging, great question because it's multifold. You're trying to attract fleets to make a change, and you're trying to attract the companies that will be selling batteries or vehicles or support or parts distribution centers to support the fleets. So there are really probably two different directions there. That number one is, in terms of attracting fleets to make the change, look at the other states that have their MOU signed and what they're doing, what are their policies, what are the steps they're taking to help fleets in their area take that first step. In terms of attracting business, boy, I don't know that I could give you one simple answer. Obviously, everybody is trying to get that business brought to their city right now, and you're unlike the internal combustion engine world, where there's a substantial distribution network of diesel engines and foundries and other things that are part of the passenger car and truck industry. With electric trucks, it's a whole new industry with things coming from all over the place. So it's new theories. You've got several different small OEMs that are building factories that are focused on only one fleet initially, that there are alignments with most of the e-commerce folks focusing on predominantly one manufacturer, in several cases that manufacturer only going to produce for that fleet for a while. That's unheard of in the internal combustion engine world. So there's some very different partnerships, different things happening, and the dynamics are, to say the least, dynamic right now.
Other questions for Dave?
This is Colin Dusing with the Will County Land Use Office. I've got two completely different questions. One is for your study for the electric vehicles. Are you taking seasonality into play? Because battery efficiency is much less in the wintertime, especially in severe winters. And two, have you come across any, since Will County is a local government with zoning, have you found any zoning issues, common zoning issues with providing the areas to supply the electric vehicles?
Okay, I'm taking some notes from your question here. First question was on seasonality. Yes, that is clearly an impact, and it's not well understood yet. We are quite excited that we've got fleets that are participating in run-on-less in very northern climates, including Vancouver, Montreal, Minneapolis, Chicago, New York City. Unfortunately, in September, we won't know that seasonality. We're having discussions with some folks to see if they would fund taking some of those trucks and monitoring them out into the winter months to understand the true difference. Obviously, the OEMs and fleets will be doing that anyway, but we'd like to make some of that more public. There are already numbers available from passenger cars. We know it's an impact. But there are also some really intriguing changes that are going to make you raise your eyebrows and go, say what? I know Lion Electric has participated in workshops with us, and they've already mentioned, for instance, on transit buses that they make, that they are finding that it's far more efficient for the electric vehicle not to use electric heating for the vehicle. So as absurd as this sounds, it's much easier to use a diesel-fired heater, which many vehicles have used for a long, long time to heat sleeper bunks in the winter. If you put a diesel-fired heater on an electric bus, the bus batteries operate much longer, and you've got a very small diesel heater that does a much better job of heating the interior of the bus. So I've told folks, I guarantee you in the future, I can see it right now because I manage all of our social media and I see a lot of other social medias. there's going to be a picture of a Tesla semi that everyone in the whole world knows they only make electric vehicles, or Lion Electric, sitting at a truck stop putting diesel in. And what kind of idiot is driving this vehicle? Well, sorry folks, it's not an idiot. It's somebody that has a diesel fired heater and they've only got a small couple gallon tank, but it makes their batteries run much farther, last much longer for diesel vehicle operation or for electric vehicle operation. So there are some interesting interim hybrids like that that are happening that are going to help with the seasonality. Your second question, I hope that was a good answer to the first one. The second one on zoning and zonality issues, whatnot. I see some positives that right now it's not hard to find in the world signs that say no jake brake operations, no compression brakes. Well, we're going to have regenerative braking that doesn't make that kind of noise. So the trucks are going to be able to harness that energy and slow down and put energy back into their rechargeable batteries. You've also got plenty of operations areas where there's no truck operation allowed at night because you don't want the noise disrupting people that are sleeping. Well, if we've got silent electric vehicles, maybe some of those signs need to be rethought in the future. So I think those are all positives for the future of battery electric vehicles. Colin, does that help answer both questions?
I didn't think about the noise aspect of it. What I was asking about was mostly the size and operation of the land use of charging, how that's configured, what kind of infrastructure is required, that sort of thing, and are the local zoning ordinance, the land use ordinances, prohibiting that? Are they silent on that, or what have you found?
I don't know that we have enough experience yet to give you much of an answer, Colin. The only folks that have truly massive recharging systems put in place are a few municipalities that have all their transit buses, for instance, already converted over to battery electric. And in some of those cases, they have some fairly substantial overhead gantry work to supply hanging electric charging cables down to the facilities. And I have no idea how different zoning areas will view that, as whether it's positive, negative, etc. So it's yet to be determined.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Other questions?
Hey, Dave, this is Matt Hart from the Illinois Trucking Association. I could go on and on and on with questions, and I won't. And the questions I have, I always talk to you offline anyway. But I just want to say, great presentation. This is fantastic. This is a lot for anybody to digest, but you did a great job in encapsulating everything that you guys are doing. So great job, great presentation.
Thank you, Matt. We're available to work with you. Obviously, what the world has seen with cyber threats causing fuel disruption and price increases, freezes in Texas shutting down petroleum factories. There's a war in the Middle East yet again. A lot of factors can change the price of diesel fuel and change it relatively rapidly. Hopefully, trucking companies and utilities can come to long-term cost agreements, time of use. What's really, really going to be critical to the industry is smart charging. And we've talked with some of these fleets that are participating on Run on Less, and the basic answer we have to date is smart charging isn't smart enough yet. But as we move into the future, it's going to need to be a situation where the software or management system knows which trucks due out first in the morning, what the charging rates from the utility companies are, the time of use variance in charging costs, and very intelligently know which vehicles get filled first at what levels, what's most efficient for that battery and its charging capabilities, so that by the time 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning rolls around and the vehicles are starting to pull out, those vehicles that need to have the longest, biggest charge for their day's pull are all ready to go. So it's very easy to visualize that it can be done. Making it happen in the real world is another thing that we're just starting on.
Any other questions before we close out? Hearing none. Dave, thank you so much for the presentation. And I'm sure that some of the members will have some follow-up questions and would love to have you participate in a future committee meeting for an update, as you know, this is a very, very important subject, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. So with that, thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you for the opportunity. Know that I'll be up in your neighborhood to film the Alpha Bakery truck this summer. So if there's an opportunity to stop by and have a meeting, we could do that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next agenda item, our 7th, which is CDOT project updates by Elaine McKenzie from Cambridge Systematics on the Chicago Rail Futures 2 study, as well as the Chicago Southwest Industrial Corridor study. Elaine, take it away.
All right, thank you, everybody. And I apologize, my camera doesn't seem to be working, so I'll just speak. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Everybody, yes, a couple of nods, good. Yes, thank you. I'm glad to be here today on behalf of Chicago Department of Transportation to give you an update on 2 studies that we have underway related to freight in the Chicago region. The Chicago Rail Futures 2 study and the Southwest Industrial Corridor study. Next slide, please. And I just have about a dozen slides overall. Both of these studies are in the Chicago Rail Futures 2 study is in the first half, and then the Southwest Industrial Corridor study is just kicking off. So for today, I want to give you an update on both of these studies, share some information, solicit any feedback or questions from this group, and then definitely looking to continue to engage with you and give an update as these studies continue. So the Chicago Rail Futures 2 study is really focused around a key question of what does the future hold for rail in Chicago and the Chicago region, and how can we shape that future in a way that best leverages opportunities while minimizing negative impacts for everyone. Next slide, please. So a little bit of history, and some of you may be familiar with this. So Chicago undertook the first freight rail future study in the early 2000s, actually started at the end of the 1990s. And this was the first real effort to estimate economic impacts of rail to the region. And this study was critical to make the case for some of the things in terms of rail that we have right now, including the CREATE program, as well as CTCO and other things in the Chicago region, because the study really put numbers behind the idea that it's important for both the national and regional economies to invest in Chicago's rail system and look at different options, including diverting around Chicago and looking at different gateways. And the numbers really supported the idea of investing in the Chicago region. So about 10 years later, moving forward, the CREATE program's underway, about a third to a half done in 2013. And we undertook with the CREATE partners a review of the estimated benefits of the program. At that time, the number we came up with was about $31.5 billion in benefits. So this is across the spectrum, looking at benefits to rail users as well as roadway users, safety impacts, communities, everything that USDOT looks in terms of benefit cost analysis. And so the benefits of over $31 billion with a cost of less than $5 billion really continued to make the case for investing in Chicago's regional rail system. So today we're looking to update this existing work as well as look more comprehensively about not only the economic but other types of impact of rail in the Chicago region. So these initial efforts really focused on big numbers, national issues, and these are still important, but we also wanted to be able to illustrate the relationship between rail and the regional economy. And understand the benefits and impacts to local residents, businesses, and users, so folks in the Chicago and CMAP region. And the purpose of this is to both support the conversation about rail investment to keep pushing for these needed investments, but also positioning to be able to make these investments in an equitable way and really think about that equity and community impacts as well as national and economic impacts when we think about rail in the Chicago region. Next slide, please. So just have a couple of statistics. You know, many of you know, I think we all on this call know the importance of rail in Chicago to the national economy. About half of intermodal containers in the entire US move through Chicago. About 30% of rail cars move through Chicago. And this incorporates over $6 billion worth of goods, or $600 billion worth of goods, I'm sorry, each year. And this is everything from coal moving from Wyoming, consumer products moving from the West Coast ports, vehicles, food, pulp and paper, energy products. It really touches all aspects of the economy. Next slide, please. We've started to look at the data to really dig down as, you know, okay, we know the aggregate numbers of why trade is important, but we also can get down into the details of which states really rely on Chicago's rail system for trade. So on the left, we look at the top 10 states originating rail traffic through Chicago in terms of tonnage. And the big states are really the ones focused on energy products. So Wyoming, with coal, Wisconsin, Illinois, Texas with frac sand and other energy related products. And then you see also represented here are a lot of the markets moving a lot of consumer goods to and from the ports. So California, British Columbia, as well as some other major markets. When we look at this in terms of value, the consumer goods really rise to the top. So things coming out of the ports in California, as well as British Columbia. And then even you're seeing the East Coast ports and consumer markets like New Jersey and stuff is represented as well. So this really just helps make the case that, you know, not only is Chicago important for the national economy, but it's also important to these states' economies. And really, you know, these states should be in favor of and you know, really we want to get their support and, you know, help them understand and put their support behind investments in the Chicago region because it supports their economies as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're also looking at local impacts and equity impacts of rail. So one of the things that the study has undertook this spring is we rolled out a community equity survey where we asked questions really related to rail and freight impacts from the local perspective. So we put this out to numerous organizations and asked them to also share with community members to really get a broad perspective. And, you know, the idea here is really to ask the questions and get as much input as we could in terms of what is the relationship and understanding about equity as it relates to rail and freight issues. So we've gotten 200 responses from community members, as well as over 60 responses from agencies. And I'm not going to share, you know, dig into the details today, but just wanted to share some of the highlights that we're finding. So in terms of understanding the purpose of rail, community members really focused on moving people. So connections to Metra, Amtrak, having accessibility of non-car related modes. Whereas from the agency perspective, we received more responses related to moving goods, so on the freight side. In terms of health and environmental concerns, both, you know, many concerns on both sides in terms of freight overall, but the community members were really focused on trucks and the responses we received really saw trucks as more impactful than trains. Whereas from the agency perspective, we received a variety of perspectives of trucks and trains contributing to health and environmental issues. In terms of safety, similarly, on the community side, you know, really trucks are what they see and what they're perceiving, as well as, however, on the agency side, you know, at-grade rail crossings and other rail issues were brought to the forefront a little bit more in addition to trucks and an understanding of what the safety concerns are. And so overall, you know, that agencies are, that the responses that we're getting are really have a little bit more focus on the rail side versus from the community perspective. It's really, what they can see on the ground, the trucks that are moving down their streets. And on both sides, wear and tear from freight vehicles, access, ability for bikes and pedestrians to use these shared systems, we're seen as concerns as well. So again, we're not trying to, this is a very small part of the conversation around equity, but we're really trying to understand, the relationship between equity and freight and rail and put some more words behind that. Next slide, please. As part of this, we've just started undertaking some research into who is being affected by rail yards. So continuing the equity conversation from a data-driven perspective. What you can see on the left is we looked at 3 kind of levels. We looked at within the CMAP region. We looked at the city of Chicago, suburban Cook County, and then the collar counties. And we asked who is living within half a mile of a railroad versus the overall population of these regions. And what you can see illustrated here, so the dark lines are representing the region as a whole. So for example, the line on the left, the darker blue is the city of Chicago versus the lighter blue next to it is within the city of Chicago, the population's within half a mile of a rail yard. Similarly, red is Cook County, suburban Cook County, and then the lighter red is the residents within half a mile of the rail yard. And then similar with gray, the dark being the collar counties and the lighter gray being within half a mile of the rail yard. What you see overall is that people who live below the poverty line are Hispanic or Black and are disproportionately represented within half a mile of rail yards. So we really are seeing some of our equity-focused disadvantaged community members really clustered around these areas. And so this is an area of research that we're looking to continue and better define and dig into the specific implications of this. Next slide, please. So overall, in terms of immediate next steps for the study, we're going to continue studying the rail and equity issues. We'll be holding some focus groups and working with the Transportation Equity Network as well as others to better dig into some of these findings. And we'll be putting together a white paper that lays out what we've learned in terms of rail and equity issues. We'll also be putting together a state of the rail system white paper. And, there's been a lot of changes both over the last 20 years as well as over the last year and the last, month as we're looking at these mergers and other changes in the rail system. So, it's really important to be able to kind of understand where we're at today and how we've gotten there so that we can think about what we want the future to be. And then we'll be beginning our next phase of outreach, really focusing on rail users and other businesses, as well as continuing to work with the railroads as well as other stakeholders to understand rail performance challenges and what they see from their perspective as next for the Chicago region. I'll pause right there. That's what I have for the Rail Future study. Are there any immediate questions? Otherwise, I think I can take questions at the end as well. I do have the other study to update you with as well.
Yes, Elaine, this is Libby Ogard. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Libby.
Hey, so I'm a little concerned that we're using a base of 2017 and it's 2021. And part of the reason for that concern is that there has been quite a lot of discussion within the rail industry about the fact that the loss of coal is accelerating at a faster pace than was originally projected. And the rail network is really struggling to grow. And when you look at 2017, that was there was still quite a bit of coal in the network. I think particularly as we're looking at rail at such an important gateway as Chicago, we need to be looking at more recent data and really try to dig into what are the challenges for volume growth and talk specifically about service. And so one of the slides that you had, you talked about 2 stakeholder groups. basically community, I understand those are neighbors. And then you talked about agencies. I didn't hear you talk about freight shippers. And the reason I'm concerned about that is that, you know, a lot of the Wisconsin population is within 200 miles of an intermodal terminal in the Illinois system. And so as a result of Chicago Create, as you know, and the fact that we've got Metra, which requires anybody accessing the intermodal network or even the carload network from the north, there's a substantial amount of delay to get in and out of the rail terminals to be either interchanged or to be delivered. And that really needs to be analyzed because of the fact that if you look at the growth in the intermodal terminals, because intermodal is growing now, it kind of struggled in the last year or so, but it's growing now. We're putting a lot of that freight on the roads coming in and out of terminals rather than putting it on a rail system network and having the rail steel wheel interchanged in the downtown Chicago area or the Chicago region. So will you be looking at that?
Yeah, thank you, Libby. Great question, and the answer to both parts is yes. We have procured the most recent confidential waybill sample, so we will be able to update the data. You're right, you know, 2017 is a very different world than we are right now. So we're both looking to update that data over the summer. And so, you know, next time we come back to this group, I think we'll be able to share some updated numbers and insights. We're also, as part of our next phase of the outreach process, looking to connect with shippers and other businesses to understand their perspective. This was something that, so this study was originally scoped pre-COVID, and that was, you know, the original timeline was to undertake some of these activities in 2020. Due to the pandemic, we pushed some of that out because, you know, we really want to understand what the future means. And I think we're getting to a point where we have a little bit more information and understanding of that. And you know, businesses and shippers do as well, rather than just reacting to, you know, the state of the world. So we're really excited to be able to speak with people and understand that perspective of, you know, both the growth that's happening now as well as what they see for the future of rail. Okay, well, I'll continue, and again, you know, love to take any questions about either of these studies at the end. Next slide, please. So the other study that we're just kicking off and just started this spring is the Chicago Southwest Industrial Corridors, or SWIC study. Next slide. And this study is really taking a deep dive and a local look into what are the issues and challenges regarding freight transportation and industrial development. This is specifically looking at the southwest side of Chicago, as you can see as circled on the map. But obviously, you know, a lot of these issues and a lot of these challenges are recreated throughout the region. So one of the goals of the study is to really support Chicago DOT as well as other agencies in understanding these issues and developing tools that can be used to address them throughout the region. This study is aligning with ongoing work by the Department of Transportation, Chicago DOT, as well as Department of Planning and Development, Department of Public Health, as well as other city departments. And we're also getting input from CMAP and other groups as well. The objectives of the study are really to understand challenges faced by communities. So this is very focused on asking questions and understanding these perspectives. And we're intending to use the answers to guide the study. So it's relatively open-ended in some ways at this point. One of our first tasks that I'll mention in a little bit more details in a second is really to solicit the stakeholder input and use it to shape what the focus of the study is going to be. We know we want to identify opportunities to address these what these major issues are, and make sure that we understand, who needs to be involved in terms of addressing them. So there may be things that the city can address on its own. Some things may need a regional perspective, or even involve state or federal regulation or other policies. As a consultant team, we'll be supporting CDOT in researching and documenting information to support the development of policies or other solutions, as well as recommending future actions. Next slide, please. So we have a very broad team together that I wanted to mention because the goal of this study was to really provide a number of different skills that are available to help with understanding and addressing these issues. Cambridge Systematics is the prime consultant. We've put together a broad team of sub-consultants, including a large stakeholder and engagement and outreach team led by the Purple Group and supported by Rodriguez Media Communications and CMT. We have a number of planning and engineering firms to support this study, including Sam Schwartz, CIPC, and Transmart EJM. And then finally, we have a firm that really focuses on health and air quality metrics and has worked across the country and internationally looking at the impacts of land use decisions, transportation, and other factors in terms of community health outcomes. And so we're really excited to bring that capability to this team as well. Next slide, please. In terms of initial steps, as I mentioned, we're really focusing on gathering information. So we will be holding one-on-one or focus group style meetings with key stakeholders, advocacy groups, and community representatives. We'll be documenting what we're hearing and putting some research behind it. We're developing what we're calling a community-driven matrix of concerns, and I'll share a little bit of details on the next slide about this. But essentially, this is identifying what the concerns are, what the specific issues are, within air quality, what are the specific issues people are worried about or want to see addressed, which agencies or organizations may play a role in doing that, and then what the next steps might be. So what's the process to get from identifying the concern to a solution? As just mentioned, we definitely are focusing on who has authority or responsibility for each concern area. So we know some things the city may be able to address on their own, and some things may need a number of different partners or a number of different steps. So we'll be using this information to define the most critical issues and scope out further actions. One area in particular that we'll be looking at is the 31st Street corridor. And this is something that's being done and was in partnership with and partially funded by the RTA. So the idea is really looking at this corridor, which has a range of uses, land uses, it changes block from residential to industrial to commercial, a variety of different users. So we're hoping to use this as a case study to identify some of the critical issues and build a toolbox that might be used to address issues on 31st Street as well as other places in the city and region. We're also talking about developing freight-related health metrics, so understanding in more detail the relationships between air quality and other health outcomes and freight and trucks that move through a community, as well as looking to define what additional stakeholder engagement will look like throughout the study. Next slide, please. And I just want to share very briefly the type of concerns that we're hearing and documenting so far. So these have been heard through previous planning efforts as well as community meetings that have been held this spring, either by interest groups or other organizations. We're hearing a lot about air quality, air pollutants, and how they're contributing to health outcomes. We've heard that community groups really, don't feel like they have a voice at the table. They don't have an ability to give input into the planning and permitting process. And then we're hearing specifics about, permitting for uses that communities may not want, like asphalt or other freight-related uses. And then the impacts of, schools being built in industrial zones and exposure to students to air pollution and other safety risks. So again, broad range of concerns that we're hearing. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're also looking to identify what organizations should be involved. And, this was something that's been really eye-opening at first. We just started listing with all of these concerns, okay, who needs to be at the table? And it is a huge list of organizations and agencies everywhere from the city level to federally, including, regional and state agencies such as CMAP and the state of Illinois. And in some cases, there'll need to be partnership with private or non-governmental agencies or organizations as well. Next slide, please. So that's the end of my presentation and update today. Like I said, both of these studies in pretty early stages, looking to get any feedback or additional questions from this group. Otherwise, we'll definitely look to come back and give you an update of as the study progresses and looking forward to getting everybody's input.
Any questions for Elaine?
Herbert, this is Eric Morello. Quick question.
Eric, was that you? You're breaking up a little bit.
Yes.
You might have a bad connection, Eric. If you have the text box and you can in the message board, we'll read your question to you.
Hey, Herbert, it's Matt Hart. I've been having some issues here too, and I don't know if it's my local connection or if Eric's got the same issue.
Okay, I see Eric said, sorry about the connection. Curious if we know the geographic boundaries of the Southwest Industrial Corridor study. Elaine?
Yeah, so that study is particularly focused on the area of the city that's from I-290 south to 55th Street and I-94 west to the city boundary. So I don't know if we can go back. There was a slide that had a map, Ryan, if we can go back a couple of slides that shows that. So this is the area circled that we're focusing on, but again, a lot of these issues are permeating throughout the region. So want to make sure that as we're thinking about this, there's opportunities obviously to coordinate with and partner with potentially other regions to implement solutions and actions.
Okay, and Eric said thank you, so that must have answered his question there. In terms of Elaine, in terms of the goal of this particular study, is it anticipated does CDOT want to roll this to other corridors as well, or was there a specific reason why it was this area that was targeted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, this area of the city is particularly impacted by freight. There's a lot of the industrial corridors there. There's a lot of the freight-related businesses, and everything from rail to trucking. There's distribution centers going into the region, and there's been a lot of discussion, with community members and groups about needing to address some of these issues in this region. So, again, I don't think it's, I don't think these are issues that are unique to the southwest side of Chicago, but it's certainly an area where they're very pervasive. So, that's where we're starting from. But again, the idea is that some of these solutions or processes could be beneficial. The hope is for other regions of the city and the broader CMAP region as well.
Timing wise, when is it anticipated that the study will be completed?
So the SWIC study, we're just getting started this spring, and it's expected to run, for a couple of years. I think that given that it is relatively open-ended of what the study is going to focus on at this point, we really want to spend the next couple of months engaging with stakeholders, understanding, what the priority issues are. And then we'll have a better sense of kind of, the timing of when we're going to be looking at specific pieces of it. So yeah, right now, not a good, not a solid end date for the study, but I think, we do want to move quickly, but also make sure that we're, taking the time to understand and make sure that we're addressing the most important concerns in a thoughtful way. So sorry, that's kind of a non-answer to your question, Herbert.
That's all right, but good to know that it is open-ended and that this will be pretty expansive for the next couple of years. So, okay. Other questions for Elaine before we move to our next agenda item? Hearing none, Elaine, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Herbert, and everybody for the opportunity to talk to you.
All right, our next agenda item, Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Herbert. This agenda item was included, again, we did this previously a couple meetings ago, but it's just meant to provide space for committee members to share updates on your organization's work. The pandemic has made it much more challenging to network, to just share that kind of, those bits and pieces of information that you normally share as we're sitting in a room together. So this is just meant to be an opportunity to share, any new projects you might have or any significant milestones you've reached, or, any other information that you think the group would be interested to learn more about. If you don't have anything to share, that's perfectly fine. And you can just let us know that you'll pass. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can actually see each other's faces. And if you're able to and willing to, it would be great if we could all be on video as much as possible. And so with that, my plan is to just go down the committee list in alphabetical order and give you an opportunity to share any updates that you might have. We are running short on time, so if we keep responses limited to just a minute or two, that would be great. And with that, I will hand it over to Joe Alonzo from CDOT if you're with us.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Hi, Joe.
Hi, how you doing, Ryan? Elaine just gave the overview of two CDOT studies that we've begun, and just want to mention that we will be coming back to the CMAP Free Committee to give a more updated version of both studies with more details as we embark on these two initiatives. So looking forward to coming back to the CMAP Free Committee with both studies.
Great, thanks, Joe. So next I'll move to Elaine Bottomley.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to give a quick little update. This is kind of more so a Council of Mayors update than a Will County Governmental League update. But a couple weeks ago, IDOT went ahead and released a circular letter, CL 2021-13, and it's a local government component of COVID relief. So these are funds that are going to be received by IDOT that are then going to be passed through to CMAP, and CMAP is working on internally figuring out how they're going to distribute these funds. So I know myself and a bunch of other planning liaisons from the Council of Mayors are really looking forward to seeing how these funds are going to be distributed. I think a lot of us have been daydreaming about these funds coming through and, what does that mean? How many more projects could we possibly fund? And I know personally, I have a lot of projects that are freight related that I could definitely go ahead and fund. And I think that's the case for all the other councils in the region. So that's the big update that I have.
Great, thanks, Elaine. So Mike Burton had to leave a little bit early so he could participate in another meeting. So I'm going to move down to Raymond Drake from UPS.
Good morning. Certainly, I think great content here this morning. A very interesting presentation by North American Commercial Freight Trucking Electrification Group. I thought that was interesting stuff, and certainly brings attention, I guess, to a lot of the longer range infrastructure planning that is required to really, make these new technologies in transportation be possible. So that very interesting, and certainly always glad to hear the updates about any potential improvements through the CREATE program. Certainly very, very critical, I think, to freight movement in this country.
Great, thanks, Ray. Next is Colin Dusing from Will County.
Hello. The Will County Division of Transportation has been working with CMAP on the Western Will County freight area plan, the Will Connects program. Hopefully that'll be concluding soon. And then also the Division of Transportation has been working on the Eastern Will County area, not as comprehensive as the Western, but they're still working on it. And then lastly, the Will County Board this week will be taking up the Will County Energy Efficiency Plan, which does have a large transportation component to it, which does include not only truck freight, but also marine freight as well.
Great, thanks. Next is Henry Guerrero from the Tollway.
The Tollway is very focused on construction of the Central Tri-State and trying to deliver that project. Myself, I very much make sure to track congestion metrics and pay attention to those hotspots as they arise and try to keep trucking moving on the South Tri-State. That's really our biggest focus at the moment. We have some payment type methods, but those are more on the customer side as opposed to the freight world. Freight world pretty much understands tolling and toll payments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Matt Hart from Illinois Trucking.
Yeah, and I'll kind of cover for Mike too, because it involves our intermodal committee, which Mike chairs. Now for a little over a year now, I think, been doing, we have monthly data of the truck movements in and around the intermodal facilities, which has been very helpful, not only for us, but also for the rail facilities as well. And we're building on that and expanding on that, and that'll be coming out here in the next few months. Our intermodal conference, which we normally have in January, February, we're still going to try and have just very much focused on intermodal freight movement. And then one safety issue that that we're working on here is the because we have to do more things online like this. The Illinois Trucking Association's moved our Teens, Trucks, and Traffic program to an online version so we can educate folks about how to safely share the road with large vehicles, which that will be available to anybody in the state. We're finishing up that video production right now. As in addition to that as well, we've got some Scott's Law video to go in that as well to teach motorists to slow down and move over for emergency vehicles that are on the side of the road. So, thanks.
Great, thank you. Next is Clark Carricker from Illinois Chamber.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. We are just totally focused here at the Chamber on the end of session. 14 days left, not that I'm counting. Trying to prevent some road fund diversions and make sure everything goes smoothly the last couple of weeks here.
Great, thanks. Next is Kazuya Kawamura from UIC.
Hi, I just wanted to update on this new project. We received the funding from National Science Foundation to look at the very futuristic technology. We call autonomous pods. If you can imagine, it's like a little wagons that you see in the airport running around carrying a suitcase and so forth. But this one will be running on the road, and it's autonomous and also probably powered by electric. And we are trying to study how these kind of technology can be used to carry both freight as well as passenger. And these things we imagine running around probably have artificial intelligence, and they're going to connect with each other and so forth, maybe 5 long, 4 long, 2 long, depending on efficiency. And part of the project, would like to reach out to the industry experts to see how they see the best use of these technologies are. We are looking at 20, 30 years in the future, but want to see the pick the brains of the best and brightest on this committee. So I'll be reaching out to the some members of this committee to get input on the potential of such technology in the next few months.
Great, thank you. Next, I don't think Michael from FHWA is here, so I'll go on to John Loper from DePage. Oh, and maybe John isn't with us anymore either. So I'll go on to Libby.
Hi, this is Libby Ogard. I just wanted to mention that the RAISE grant, which used to be known as BUILD and before that Tiger, has some new criteria that it's referencing from an environmental perspective and is asking applicants to come up with reports on climate change, resiliency, and other climate-related studies that are part of either a state or a regional transportation plan. And I was wondering if CMAP has anything that would substitute or would satisfy that commitment.
That is something I will have to look into and get back to you.
Thank you.
Yep. So next would be, is Adam Rod from CDA.
Hey everyone, well, those of you who could join us back in February, I think recall I gave you a comprehensive update on O'Hare and the airports and air cargo world for now. Big announcement though by the commissioner last month on some major reorganizational changes, which includes me. Some of you already got word of this, Ryan, of course you too, that I will be shifting away from my traditional planning duties for many, many years and starting up a dedicated cargo office here at O'Hare for the first time in many, many years to do. So this is a great thing for the airport to have full-time dedicated staff on cargo. And that's basically effective immediately. Obviously only enhances my role on the freight committee. So glad to be doing it. And of course, we'll keep everybody posted.
Great, thanks, Adam. Next is Deanna Smith from IDOT.
Hi, everyone. We are in the process of developing a rail needs assessment to identify the capital rail improvements or rail-related operational issues that are important to the movement of goods and services in the state. We want to engage railroad owners and operators serving Illinois, as well as rail shippers, logistical groups, federal, state, and local agencies, and the public in this effort. We want to develop this needs assessment in preparation for our Illinois State Rail Plan, which is due in December of 22. We are in the process of data gathering, and some of you may have gotten an email from me. If not, and you're interested or have any input or concerns, please reach out and contact me. So we just kind of want to identify the current inventory of the rail network, opportunities for strengthening the rail network, to improve safety where rail and highway interfaces occur, and funding sources that may be available to IDOT to pursue these opportunities. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out, contact me, and we'll get you on the list and keep you apprised of the study. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Herbert Smith.
In the interest of time, and because Eric has had some difficulty, I'm just going to read off in the message board here what Eric had to say, that the Union Pacific Foundation will begin accepting applications June 1st from nonprofits, and he includes a link on www.up.com for the foundation applications that can be submitted.
Thank you. And thank you, Eric, for that information. Next, Peter Wolf from TTX.
Yeah, I don't have really much to say other than I think it's my third meeting, just taking it all in. Appreciate letting TTX participate. Hopefully next time I'll have a little more to say.
Oh, well, thank you. We're happy to have you here.
Thanks.
And finally is Sam Wright from Cook County.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'll be very quick. We've been, excuse me, working hard on trying to get some additional funding for the region. We've been, as Aaron mentioned at the beginning, about federal community project funds or earmarks, whatever you want to call them. We submitted a bunch of projects for that, got a few that are going to committee. We have 12 projects that are going to the Transportation Infrastructure Committee and the House. We expect that the Senate will go ahead with the earmarks process, and hopefully some of these projects, specifically some freight-related ones in terms of Illinois Port District, Butler Drive, a few toll interchange projects, a few grade separation projects, all on list. You can go onto the House Representatives' various websites to see what projects they selected. We've got a few trucking studies, one for Southwest Cook County, which is sort of just down the corridor from where Elaine was talking about in Chicago. We've got one that's just started in the southwest suburbs in Cook County. We're also working with CMAP on their South Cook one. We've got, hopefully next meeting, I'm hoping that I'll talk about the Burnham Avenue grade separation project that we're helping the Village of Burnham and the Burnham Multimodal Connector. That agreement just got sent to IDOT and should be the final one signed. So hopefully a project will have kicked off by the next meeting. I hope to give a presentation on that. We're also looking at our reviewing our freight plan, and as the new budget season comes up for the county, reviewing our freight plan and trying to see what projects we can tease out of that freight plan to help freight prosper in Cook County. So a lot of stuff happening, but all good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'll hand it back over to you, Herbert.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone's patience. We'll now turn it over to the public comment period. So for those who are still on the call, who have an interest in the from the public, that if you could raise your hand using the feature, or at this point the message board. If you have a question, we can read it off, or you can unmute yourself and share your comments.
It doesn't look like there's anybody, and also I didn't receive any public comment prior to the meeting via email.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, and again, in the interest of time, we'll adjourn here shortly. The next meeting is planned for September 20th at 10 a.m. We'll also share with the committee any additional updates. We're always looking for ideas for speakers and presentations. So we welcome everyone's input on that. And with that, I'd look to motion for adjournment.
So motion.
Seconded?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 All right, we're now adjourned. Thank you all very much. This was a great presentation, a set of presentations. Appreciate your continued participation. Have a great summer.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Bye.